God-fearing parents. They endeavored to instill in Joshua, when he was young, Bible principles that would guide him through the rest of his life. In fact, his name, Joshua, is a shortened form of a Hebrew name of a Bible character in ancient times. His name is derived from the word Joshua, and it means Jehovah is salvation in Hebrew. Joshua graduated from DeWitt Taylor High School in the year 2005. He graduated summa cum laude. He then, in 2010, graduated from the University of Florida, summa laude. He specialized in civil engineering and coastal engineering. And because of his hard work and his ethics, it led him to a successful career as an engineer with a company in Tampa that was entitled PCL. His ambition and eagerness to learn led him to explore new areas that he was interested in. In fact, he had just been offered a position with BP in Houston, Texas. Joshua, as many of you know, loves sports. His favorite team, of course, being from Florida, was the Gators. But he loved all sports, and he was diligent in what he pursued, including ski-board, which led to this accident that took his life. Now, this accident that happened on February 26th was not an act of God. It wasn't that God needed to take him somewhere else. Joshua recognized from the study of the Bible when he was young that there was a proverb written many years ago that would befall many people. And it's in the Bible. Some of you may have a Bible. If not, let me just read to you some of the text that his parents tried to instill in him as a young man. And the one that parents mentioned to me in the book of Ecclesiastes. I'll be reading it from it just so you'll know that it's not my words, but here's what the book of Proverbs, an inspired word, said regarding the accident that befell Joshua. In the book of Ecclesiastes, the 9th chapter, it speaks of something that happens to individuals. It's in the 9th chapter of Ecclesiastes, verse 11. It says, I return to see under the sun that the swift do not have the race, nor the mighty ones the battle, nor the wise one the food, nor do the understanding ones also have the riches, nor do even those having knowledge have favor. So it shows that despite logic, notice what it says, because time and unforeseen occurrence befall them all. And that's what happened in Joshua's case. If you had the opportunity to be a friend or a close relative of Joshua, you know there are very few words that we could use to describe his personality that would do justice to him. He was a very kind, generous individual. He was gentle, and he was always interested in doing for others. He gave of himself that way. One of the things that we recognized with Joshua was the training that he received from his godly parents. And these qualities were instilled in him, and he carried them through his life. Death, unfortunately, seems unfair when someone that we love, when his life is cut short, and we wonder why. Despite the fact that some may say that death is a door that leads to a better life, it leaves pain and sorrow in the hearts of the survivors. But the Bible, believe it or not, holds out a comforting hope for all individuals. And the scriptures indicate, this may be strange for some of you, but the scriptures indicate that there is that possibility that we can be united with our loved ones again, right here on earth. Now that may be a strange thought for some of you, but go back and think. When God created man, Adam and Eve, the first humans, and put them on the earth, He told them to be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth, to subdue it. His original purpose for mankind, when the earth was created, was for him to enjoy a paradise. But we know, because of a rebellion that took place, man lost that. And sin and death entered into the world. But God's purpose has never changed. It still is to have the earth filled with people that worship Him, and that the earth could be filled with a paradise again. Jesus Christ helped us to appreciate, when He was on the earth some 2,000 years ago, that there would be a resurrection. Now this may seem strange to some that feel it isn't necessary, because all He has done is pass from one life to another. But the Bible book of John mentions something that's of great interest to all of us. In the book of John, the 11th chapter, there's an account of the resurrection that took place that Jesus performed. And this is a historical fact. In fact, if we read this account very briefly, we'll come to appreciate that it's not an allegory. It's not a story. It's a historical fact. And think about this. If one professes to be a Christian, the foundation of Christian belief is the resurrection. Because if there was no resurrection, and Jesus was not resurrected, and He did not resurrect His friend Lazarus, then the Christian dogma is wrong. But let's read the account as a historical fact. It starts in verse 3 with the friend of Jesus. His name was Lazarus. Lazarus became sick, the Bible says. In John chapter 11, it says this. It says in verse 3, "Therefore his sisters dispatched word to him, saying, Lord, see, the one whom you have affection for is sick." But Jesus heard it and said, "The sickness is not with death as its object, but it is for the glory of God." Jesus loved the two sisters of Lazarus, Mary and Martha. But now when He heard that Lazarus was sick, he was in another town from where they lived. He waited 2 days before He journeyed to Lazarus' home. In the meantime, Lazarus had passed away. Jesus knew this, but He said to His disciples, "Let us go to Judea again, and let us go and see Lazarus." They said, "If Lazarus is asleep, let's not wake him up." But notice what Jesus said. Jesus said about Lazarus, "Our friend has gone to rest, and I go to wake him from his sleep. For Lazarus is dead." So Jesus, in performing a miracle, or about to perform a miracle, recognized that Lazarus had passed off in death. He was not sleeping just as one would sleep 8 hours and then wake up in the morning. But His disciples thought that's what He was talking about when He said Lazarus is asleep. Jesus said, "No, he's dead, but we'll go and visit, see what we can do." Well, on His journey, the scriptures tell us that Martha came to meet Him. And she said this. She said, "Martha therefore said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And yet at present I know that as much things as you ask God for, God will give you." Jesus then said to Martha, I know he will rise in the resurrection on the last day. Your brother," Jesus said, "will rise." So Jesus knew that he was going to resurrect this man, Lazarus, from the dead. Now the account is very interesting when it continues on. It tells us 4 days now have passed from the time that Lazarus had died and he was put in the tomb. Now they didn't embalm at that time, so obviously they wrapped him in linen, put him in a tomb, shut it with a big stone. And Jesus now said, "Let us go there." The account tells us he then went there. But this is the interesting thing. When he got there, the account tells us, he said, "Take the stone away." Martha, the sister of the deceased, said to him, "Lord, by now he must smell, for it is 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you would believe, you would see the glory of God?" Therefore they took the stone away. Now Jesus raised his eyes heavenly and said, "Father, I thank you for having heard me. True, I knew that you would hear me, but on account of the crowd standing around, I spoke in order that they might believe." And then what did he say? "Lazarus, come out." The account, if you can imagine, this man, when the stone was rolled away, in bandages, coming out, the bandages were taking off, and here was Lazarus. Jesus had performed a miracle. It astounded the crowd, but it helps us to appreciate, prior to this, 2 years prior to this, he made a statement in the book of John, chapter 5, about what he was about to do 2 years later. He said, "Do not marvel at this, because the hour is coming in which all those in the memorial tomb will hear my voice and come out. Those that did good things to a resurrection of life, those who practice vile things to a resurrection of judgment." Now that was a statement he had made 2 years prior to this. But could they believe that this was capable of Jesus? 2 years later, he performed that miracle, and Lazarus came forth. Now that should help us to believe that there is such a thing as a resurrection. If Jesus could perform that then, certainly he could perform it again as he promised he would do. But the account is very interesting because if we go back just a few verses, back to the 25th or the 20th verse, it tells us something about Jesus. It says this. It said in the 20th verse, "Therefore Martha, when she heard that Jesus was coming, said, 'If you had been here, my brother would not have died.'" She knew Jesus could perform a miracle. Why? Because Jesus had already raised 2 people from the dead before he resurrected Lazarus. Now, keep this in mind. When Jesus resurrected Lazarus, he had already resurrected 2 other people. But here's the interesting thing to help us to appreciate what kind of God Jesus' Father is and what kind of priest and king Jesus is when it comes to the resurrection. He had affection for people. The account tells us that when this took place and Jesus saw the crowd and they were weeping, the Bible says he likewise groaned in spirit and became agitated, and Jesus wept. Now why would Jesus feel hurt? And the Hebrew scriptures and the Greek scriptures say this was a deep feeling he had for Lazarus. Because he had feelings, even though he knew he would resurrect him. Because he knew death was an enemy, not a friend. So the God of comfort can help us in our time, that we need to recognize that Joshua sleeps in God's memorial, that we can look forward to a time when there will be a resurrection, just as Jesus had recorded in the Scriptures, and that death will be no more. In fact, this is the hope that the God of comfort gives to everyone. It's in the last book of the Bible. It speaks about what God would do in the future for mankind. It's in the 21st chapter of Revelation, with verses 3 and 4. It says, "With that I heard a loud voice from the throne say, 'Look, the tent of God is with mankind, and he will reside with them, and they will be his people. And God himself will be with them. And note, he will wipe out every tear from their eyes, and death will be no more.'" Isn't that a wonderful thought? Now, we mentioned at the beginning that the Bible speaks about a resurrection, and that the earth one day would be a paradise. How often have you said the Our Father prayer or the Lord's Prayer, depending on what background you have, when you said, "Thy kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven"? So aren't we really praying one day that conditions on earth would be like they are in heaven? When Jesus was on the earth, he comforted people with the hope of a resurrection. In fact, as he was dying, a thief next to him, on the torture stake next to him, being executed, said to him, "Remember me when you get into your paradise." And Jesus promised him that there would be a time when that man, that thief, would be resurrected. Jesus said, "You will be with me in paradise." So all of us then can look forward to a time when death will be no more, when we'll have the opportunity to enjoy a paradise like we had at the beginning, when man lost it because of the rebellion in the Garden of Eden. So if that be the case, then we can be comforted. It doesn't mean we don't feel the grief because we've lost a relative, we've lost a friend, but knowing that there is a hope, something to look forward to, when death will be no more, brings a certain amount of comfort at this time. So that being the case, we'd like all of you to think about what we can do now. Joshua, the Bible says, made a good name for himself. And the Bible says again in the book of Ecclesiastes, a good name is better than good oil. Joshua had a good name. So we look forward to the time when, again, we could be united with him. So the God of comfort and his Son, Jesus Christ, gives us something to look forward to. Now, if any of you would like to say a few words about Joshua, you have something to say, please come forward. This is an excellent opportunity to do so. I know some of you know him well. Maybe would like to say a few words. Feel free to come up here and say it. If you want to do that, just raise your hand and come on up.